Greetings, friends. Welcome to another Free Friday community class right here on the Green Art channel. This week, I'm excited to be talking with you about deities of the plant spirit path. Now, there are a couple of other classes like this currently on the YouTube channel. So I'm going to link to a couple of them down in the details below if you want to go on a full rabbit hole tangent on this topic. I invite you to do so. It's so interesting and so much fun. Here's where we're going today. First of all, welcome. If you are new here, my name is Josh Williams. I am a traditionally trained clinical herbalist in full-time practice here in Salt Lake City, Utah, and I produce a lot of content about our ancestral ways of working with the plants for magic, medicine, and wisdom. And we will be digging into the ways of deities today. I know that this concept of deities and plant spirits doesn't get talked about very much, and when it does, it's very reductionist. So hopefully we can go in at a depth that you don't get to see very often. This is a subject I'm fascinated by, as you will soon find out, and I love it. So we'll begin our discussion today with why plant deities are important to our practice in wortcunning, spiritual herbalism, the plant spirit path, botany, gardening, whatever you do to engage with plants. It's all relevant. Then we will do a little brief exploration of what is a deity anyway, right? What does it mean to be a god or a goddess? And then a very brief survey of some Indo-European plant spirit deities, right? I had to pare this back from about 40. So my goal here is, rather than cover every single one that exists, to just look at the ones that I know best and inspire you to go look at other ones by using this information as a springboard. Then we're going to talk about working with deities of wortcunning and how to cultivate your own hearth practice in working with these different beings. So let's get started. Why plant deities are important. First and foremost, from my perspective, and so much of what I'm going to share today is my perspective, right? It's my experience, my research, my belief. So my hope is that a lot of it makes sense to you, but if you have differing opinions or experiences, or even from an academic standpoint, if you disagree with me, that's awesome. Let's chat about it down in the comments below. The way that I look at who I personally will consider to be a god or goddess worthy of my veneration is those beings who are protectors of harmony, right? They have a vested interest in the cosmos, in the order of things, of keeping things harmonious. And harmony is an interesting word because, unlike balance, it doesn't imply that there's one sweet spot that we have to be in at all points in order for things to work out. It implies that things can ebb and flow, that things can adjust accordingly, that things may fit together in pleasing ways in an unexpected format, right? And so the deities are those more than human persons who really have a broad perspective of what the universe is and how it works, and they can see things kind of from a bigger perspective than we can. And the most important thing for me is that they are protectors of good. They are protectors of harmony, of beauty, of things fitting together in a pleasing way, which is the root etymology of the word cosmos, by the way, shared with the other word cosmetic, right? Things fitting together beautifully. That really, for me, is very important for deities that I work with. And we may talk about one or two today, if we have time, that I personally don't work with, even though other people do, because I can't see this protection of harmony in their narrative, right? So that's always fun. The plants, the way that we talk about them around these parts, are non human persons. They are fully wise, conscious, and sovereign beings, arcane spirits who have a perspective and an understanding of the world that's radically different than our own. They are rooted in the mysteries, and their roots go down into the physical soil, but also into the darkness of the unknown. And similarly, their canopies raise upward into the cosmos, into the patterns, the spirals, and into the light. And so they are liminal beings. Occupying these two spaces, drawing up from the soil below, down from the sky above, meeting in the middle and the trunk and the heart center, gathering these two polar opposites into a unified whole. And the deities, the gods and goddesses of various traditions, I think should be doing the same thing, right? they should be using their big perspectives, their ability to see the web of life from a much larger view than you and I can, to do the same thing, to gather wisdom from wherever the wisdom exists, and bring it into a usable form. And the nice thing is that for traditions who are fortunate enough to have some folklore, some legends, some myths, some pastime around various deities, generally we see this in one way or another, right? We see the god or the goddess going in and having this experience, or going on this journey, or doing, enacting this pastime that really exemplifies how to gather mystery and put it to work. While not all gods and goddesses are necessarily green wisdom keepers, many of them are, because the plants are exemplary citizens of the universe, right? They are ones who create harmony. They are members of nature. They are generous. They are involved in the sacred cycles of reciprocity. They are attuned to the seasons. They really do things quite beautifully. And this is why we say that plants are our greatest teachers, right? They show us how to do it. They show us how to do it from their perspective, but then we sort of mold that into the human perspective and make it work. So a lot of these deities are green wisdom keepers. They also love the plants like you and I love the plants. They are aware of the stories, of the virtues, of the ways that various plants came into being, and of the different functions and virtues that particular plants add to the harmony of the universe. And so by aligning to them, we align to their more than human perspective of the plant's other than human perspective in service of the human perspective, right? It just gets better. And that's why I say synergy and entourage, that the deities and the plants are just two different non-human persons, that more is more. When we have the support of our plant spirit allies, and the support of our ancestors, and the support of land spirits, and the support of the gods and goddesses, we have an entourage of non-human persons who add so much texture and tapestry and depth to our everyday experiences. And I think that's pretty amazing. So what is a deity anyway? You might have your own experiences or beliefs about this. I'll share with you mine, because this is a concept that might be new to some people. And it's a question that even a lot of people who believe in the gods and goddesses, or a god, uh, have never really thought about. Like, what makes a deity, right? So, from my perspective, which comes from the Indo-European reconstructed traditions, meaning we're looking at philosophy, cosmology, ritual cycles from the Indo-Iranian world all the way through Ireland, and seeing where there are similarities, we find consistently this concept of a world tree. We say in my tradition, Irminsul, right? The world tree, or the cosmic pillar, or the axis mundi, that is the center of the cosmos. And the way that I like to conceptualize this, and I picked this up from studying Proto-Indo-European research by Kaiswer Sereth, and I will reference his work in a later slide, that the deities are these beings who imagine that each deity sits on one of the infinite number of branches on the world tree, and the world tree is sort of the skeleton, or the underlying form or framework of the entire universe. It's not literal, right? It just shows us how things relate, how things move, how things are born, how they're maintained, how they die, and what happens after they die. So Irminsul, Yggdrasil, the Ashwadatta tree of the Vedas, all these different concepts of world tree that we see in all of the Indo-European traditions just sort of try to show us how the cosmos is arranged. And the deities are the beings who sit on the branches or ride the branches, and they have a vested interest and sometimes particular skill sets that allow them to perceive, and sometimes navigate, and sometimes manage or heal or harmonize, empower or bless particular aspects of reality, right? So when we hear somebody talk about something like a goddess of love, or a god of justice, or a deity of healing, right? Or even a god of a particular place, we know that while that god or goddess is a full person and they are as complicated as you and I, if not more, they have a particular vested interest in love, right? Whenever love happens, there's some part of their awareness that's present there. There's some part of their being that's invested in that aspect of reality. So, deities, then, they're the branch riders, they are influencers, sometimes protectors and guardians, more often than not, of particular aspects of reality. And from the animist perspective, especially the anthropological and the animist definition, we would say that deities are more than human, right? Um, Plants are other than human. They're here with us. They have physical bodies like we do. They respirate. They have a birth and a life and a death. They procreate in their own ways. They're other than us, but they're similar to us. Deities are more than us or radically different than us. They are a completely different kind of person, but they are persons nonetheless. We should never divorce the deities from their personhood. You know, they may not be humans, but they are people. And this is very important. If they're not people, then we can't relate to them. There's no reason to work so hard for their kinship, right? Another big thing for me with deity is to embrace the mystery as more important than the mental gymnastics. People can really get trapped, and I can do this too, right? I'm speaking from personal experience in trying to really figure out what is a deity and how do they work and where do they live and where did they come from and who made them and what happens when they die and why in this myth did one of them get killed, but then in a myth later they were still there. Um, Embrace the mystery, right? The deities, for me, probably above any other kind of non-human person, they're a reminder that we don't know everything. We will never know everything, and there is something beautiful in not knowing everything. To be able to walk out into the world in a state of awe, in a state of reverence to the mystery, is animism, right? When we walk into a space and think we know it all, we figured it all out, we're the smartest person in the room, we're the only person in a room, this is where really problematic structures and systems come from, right? So walk out into the world, approach the gods saying, I know very little except for my own experiences. And you will have your own experiences, right? And we should lean into those. This is what our deep ancestors did. This is where the legends and the lore of the deities come from, right? From our ancestors encountering these gods and goddesses and having personal experiences with them and revelatory experiences with them. The other explanation of what a deity is, and this comes from a lot of the Indo-European Reconstructionist philosophy, and I really love this, is they're the deities who bless us, right? They're the gods and goddesses who are kind to us, who receive our offerings and our prayers, and who respond in reciprocity. They respond with blessings. Um, Not every being will do that, and there are even, you know, beings who are probably considered gods and goddesses who don't do that, which is why we don't work with them. We work with the gods and goddesses who bless us, who call us, who feel resonant with us, who we feel like we have some kinship with, right? And that's very important because even just in today's conversation, where we're going to talk about a handful of different deities, it doesn't mean that you have to honor and pray to and make offerings to and be in relationship with every single one of them. It's impossible, right? Um, there's at least as many gods as there probably are humans, right? We don't know all of them. Different cultures know different ones or different aspects of different ones, and so we engage with the ones that show us kindness. We engage with the ones that call to us, that we feel attracted to. And that, to me, is a real definition of who or what God or goddess is, what a deity is. So we will start our conversation now of a brief survey of Indo-European plant spirit deities. I'm not going to give you every detail about every one of these deities. I'm not going to give you every one of their stories. This requires you to put a little work in and go do some research. If I were to do that for even the least known of the deities we're talking about today, it would be several hours of just one class dedicated to them. So we're not going to do that. But what we are going to do is meet one set of deities from the Vedic tradition, again, all Indo-European traditions, one from the Etruscan, one from the Greek, one from the Irish, one from the Norse, and then a bunch from the Anglo-Saxon with Germanic pagan roots, right? So excited to talk about this with you. So we'll begin with the Ashwins, right? And the Ashwins, the horse twins. And this is a duo, a pair of deities. They always appear together, never separated, and we don't actually know their individual names in the Vedic, right? In later traditions, we do get names for each of them individually, but in the Vedic, they are just the Ashwins, they are the horse twins, they are gods who have a vested interest in medicine, health, the dawn, meaning the dawning of the day, and also the dawning of the mind, and wisdom, right? So they're very connected to the sun goddess. They are very connected to Hausos, the goddess of the dawn, the opener of the golden gates of the beginning. And their name, when we reconstruct their name from the Proto-Indo-European, we see them reconstructed as Diwos Sunu, which means sons of the god, right? Sons of the sky god. And this is particularly talking about Deus Pater, who becomes, Deus, Jupiter, Zeus, all of these different names of deities who are the same deity. They just, their names change as they move through different cultures and align and syncretize with different groups of people. So the Ashwins, the sons of God, these are deities that maybe a lot of people would not have put in this class. There's probably people out there who would be like, of all the Vedic deities, why did you choose the Ashvins? Why didn't you choose Soma or Indra? Or maybe why didn't you go later Hinduism and talk about, of course, Dhanvantari, right? The god who initiated the sciences of Ayurveda, even though he's not Vedic, he's Hindu. Here's why. There's a story about the Ashwins that tugs on my heartthreads, right? I love these deities very much. And that is that they are considered sort of outcast by a lot of the other Vedic gods, right? Some of the high and lofty gods say, oh, the Ashwins, we don't associate them because they are too wrapped up in the human narrative. We find that the Ashwins spend time with humans. They watch out for us. They save us in times of danger. People would call out to them, especially sailors or people at sea, when something bad was happening. And there are poetic references, of course, in the Vedas to the waves of the ocean looking like horses running across the ocean, right, to protect people. So the Ashwins receive the judgment of the rest of the Vedic pantheon because they care about humans. And for me, any deity of Wortcunning, any deity of the plant spirit path has to hold the wisdom of the plants and equally care about the humans, because if they don't care about us, A, we're not going to be able to be in kinship with them easily, and B, they're unlikely to share that green wisdom with us, right? We want the ones that are like, hey, humans, you need all the help you can get and let us help you, right? So the Ashwins are those deities. Let me also bring up, and we're going to read a couple of shlokas from the Rig Veda in the next passage that's really going to drive this home. But they are in the form of men or boys with horse heads. Okay, they are working with herbs through medicine, through health, through the cultivation of wisdom. Even dawn has something to do with herbs because it's the dawn that encourages plants to turn their head towards the sun. Um, and herbs are one thing that are very distinctly of horse and of human, right? Horses know herbs. They are herbal wisdom keepers, as are human folk. So there's a layer to the Ashwins and all of their later cognate expressions that are just so cool. So the Ashwins, we believe, had their root in the Indo-Iranian world. Again, they are Indo-European deities, so they should show up from India to Ireland in one form or another. Here's a couple of examples. In Lithuanian paganism, they are Dievo Sunelia. Hey, you got to forgive my pronunciation of some of these too. I'm really guessing. In Latvian, Dieva Deli. In the Greek, the Dioskoroi, right? The sons of Zeus, right? We see again the sons of the god. In Roman, we have the twins Romulus and Remus, who founded Rome and were related to horses. And this is how these original ancient gods sort of they change the way people see them as they move through cultures. They're still the same person. They just allow us to relate to them in different ways. We have the Germanic Alsis, of course, right? And the Anglo-Saxon Hengist and Horsa. There are examples of horse twins in Wales, in Ireland, and Scotland. Sometimes they're both horses. Sometimes they're both boys who ride horses. Sometimes one of them is a boy and one of them is a horse. There are myths where the boy is born at the same time that the horse foal is born, and so there's a connection between the two. But they always show up in this way, and they are healers and herb knowers, wanderers of the moors, and they are vested in human wellness. So I want to read you the 97th verse of the 10th book of the Rig Veda, which is an ancient Vedic text, because of the horse and herb language. Okay, check this out. Herbs that spring up in time of old, 3 ages earlier than the gods. Of these, whose hue is brown, will I declare the 100 powers and 7. Ye, mothers, have 100 homes, yea, and 1,000 are your growths. Do ye who have 1,000 powers free this my patient from disease? Be glad and joyful in the plants, both blossoming and bearing fruit, plants that will lead us to success like mares who conquer in the race. Plants by this name I speak to you, mothers, you the goddesses, steed, cow, and garment may I win back thy very self, O man. The holy fig tree is your home, your mansion is the prana tree. Winners of cattle shall ye be, if ye regain for me this man. He who hath store of herbs at hand like kings amid a crowd of men. Physician is that sage's name, fiend slayer, chaser of disease. And of course, this is a charm from the Rig Veda that the herbalist or the healer is saying to the gods, asking them to free their patient from disease, right? But look at all of the reference to herbs and horses, right? It's uncanny. And if you've never read Rig Veda, no problem. You don't need to go read the whole thing, it's a lot. But the 10th book particularly has a lot of plant charms and a lot of plant references. So, the Ashwins, if you've never met them before, they are super cool deities, knowers of the herbs and friends to the humans to the extent that some of the other gods scoff that they will sit at our table, right? Feronia, she's an Etruscan deity, not very well attested, but I've always been really fascinated by her. Feronia is a goddess associated with or involved in wilderness, wildness, fertility, and prosperity. Here you can see her image. She has all of these harvest fruits, and her hair is down. There's a little bit of, for the Etruscans anyway, a wildness to her appearance. And her name, by the way, uh, comes from the Latin, which comes from the Indo-European, feris, not cultivated, which gives us our modern English word, feral, right? So Feronia is invested in wildness, fertility, and prosperity. She's, of course, involved with plants. And that doesn't tell us very much, and it doesn't explain why I would add her to a conversation about plant spirit deities. But check this out. First, she is seen as the goddess of untamed nature and vital force. The what Hildegard von Bingen would call the viriditas, right? The energy of life, the foison, the Mayan that flows through the land, the power of life itself that will not be tamed but will only flow and change. She is a goddess that is over this energy or is deeply connected with it. So by working with her, we work with that energy. Another really important thing why I would add her to this conversation, besides the fact that she's a goddess most people haven't heard of, is that she allows the cultivation of wild plants, right? She allows us to take plants from the wild and begin to cultivate them in gardens so that we can increase the yield, increase the fertility, increase the prosperity, have enough of that plant. And this to me is such a nod toward her liminality, right? That she sort of guards the space between the wild, where humans are guests, and the cultivated, where humans are curators. Letting us kind of move between those spaces with respect. So, Feronia, Etruscan goddess, most of the deities that we hear about from that part of the world are, of course, part of the more popular Roman pantheon. But there are all of these other groups, the Gauls, the Etruscans, so cool, and there's such incredible uh, concepts of deity and connections to deity, really worth looking at if you are geeky about the Indo-European stuff, as I am. Demeter, of course, some people say Demeter. I prefer Demeter because of the linguistics. She is the goddess that is involved with crops, the growing of crops, especially cereal grains or nourishing herbs, of fertility and of the seasons, right? So you may have heard about Demeter's probably most famous story, which involves Zeus, her daughter Persephone, and Hades, the god of the underworld, whereby Demeter's daughter Persephone, who comes to embody the spring, and Demeter embodies the fruitfulness of things, the fullness or ripeness of things. Persephone's minding her own business, walking through a field. Some people say she's picking poppies, which has its own layers. And Hades takes an interest in her and says, I really like her. And the courting, which goes nowhere, the unrequited love happens. Persephone, by one means or another, depending on which version of the story you read, sometimes it's really dark, so we won't bring it up here, ends up down in Hades. And when she does, Demeter is so heartbroken that she withdraws all of the fertility, all of the power, all of the fecundity from the land, and everything shuts down. The world turns into winter, all the plants die back, the soil freezes, everything is dead. And it becomes obviously very bad for the animals and the humans, but it gets so bad that even the gods themselves start to suffer by Demeter's sadness. So, Zeus is entreated to help, and other gods, and even Hecate gets involved, and they go. And this is a long story and a long journey. You can go look it up, but ultimately they make a deal with Persephone and Hades that Persephone can be allowed to stay with him for half the year, right? Which explains the winter. When she's gone, Demeter is sad. And then she has to return to her mother for half the year, which causes Demeter to create fecundity and fertility in the land. So this is a mythological explanation of the seasons, especially as they relate to agriculture, right? This is why the Demeter and Persephone mythos is so big for a lot of poison path herbalists. The connection of poppies or potentially amanita mushrooms. It's a whole thing, right? The ancient Eleusinian mysteries are around the story of Demeter and Persephone, and they, from what we understand, end with the priest showing the adept one grain of wheat, which is supposed to give them a moment of enlightenment, really understanding the connection between seed, grain, death, and life, and all of that. Demeter is very much concerned with agriculture, and I really think that from the Greek perspective, especially, she exemplifies the Earth Mother. She exemplifies the goddess of the land, that mother who, from her physical form of Earth, gives birth to all of the life of the plants, and then receives them again as giving them birth to them as womb in the spring, and receiving them as tomb in the winter. So she really rules over mysteries of birth and death. And plants do that too, right? Plants will always teach us what comes after death, which is a return. So she has a bunch of kennings and other names. Ceto is one of my favorites, she of the grain. Thesmophoros, giver of unwritten law, which is the law of nature, right? The way of things. Eucarpos, of good crop. Carpophoros, bringer of fruits, Aurea, of all the season's fruits, right? And we should remember that her name, Demeter, is ancient and it does have Indo-European, Proto-Indo-European roots, where Da comes from Dagon, the Indo-European earth mother. Da is earth and Mater is mother. So we get Demeter, right? So Demeter, very fantastic goddess. I will give a couple references to some great books about her that I've really enjoyed reading. Our next stop is in Eir, the ancient lands of Ireland, where we meet Airmid, goddess Airmid, who, among the folks who are geeky about the Celtic stuff or the Irish pagan stuff, man, not enough people talk about Airmid. She's so cool and she has story, right? There's lore there. There's not a lot of it, but it's there. So Airmid is the knower of herbs. And remember her name, Airmid, because I have this idea with the next goddess. So Airmid is the knower of herbs. And why? So there's this king, King Dwada, and in order for someone in many of these places in the world to be king, they need to be in good physical prowess, right? They can't be maimed or injured in any way. Their body represents the land, so their body has to be in good shape. Dwada loses an arm, and Miach, who is the son of Janchecht, who's the god of healing, right? So the god of healing, Janchecht, has this son, Miach, and Miach forges King Nuada a new arm out of metal, and it is beautiful and strong and stunning, and it restores King Nuad to wholeness. For whatever reason, John Chacht, instead of being proud of his son, and maybe there's nuance in Irish paganism that I miss, he has kind of a meltdown about it, right? He gets kind of pissed off. And his response, rather than being proud of Miach's skill, is to kill him. So he kills his own son for being better at restoring the king, King Dwada, to health than he could do. And from the body of Miach, which, of course, because he's related to the god of healing, he in and of himself is a god of healing, and he restores a limb to King Dwada, so he's a god of healing. From the 365 joints and fibers of Miach's slain body emerge an herb, each herb growing from the particular point in the body where that herb has an affinity of healing. That is dialed, right? How cool is that? One plant for every one of the individual joints, organs, tissues, processes, and fibers, showing how each of those plants has a specific power in those places. And so Airmid, even though mourning the loss of her brother Miach, she takes her cloak off and lays it down to outline the human body, and she plucks every single one of the herbs that have grown from Miach's body, all 365 of them, and lays them on her cloak in a map, right? So she's mapping out where each of those herbs go. Well, our good god Janchecht has yet another meltdown and sees what she has done and realizes the power of what she has done. And he picks the cloak up and shakes it. He shakes the cloak, spreading the 365 herbs into 7 directions and destroying the map. And that's a bummer, because how cool would it be to have that, right? But Airmid continues to be the sovereign goddess of herbs and herbal healing and herbal medicine in Irish paganism. The Cathmaig Tuired, pardon my pronunciation, has this quote about Airmid: "No one knows the healing properties, but that the Holy Spirit taught them afterwards," right? So I love this because this is coming after Airmid's cloak is shook by John Checht, right? Now it's saying, now the only people who can know what the healing properties are of the herbs, because they've been scattered, are the ones to whom the Holy Spirit teaches, right? And you can de-Christianize that if you want. You don't have to. The Holy Spirit, again, the Veritas of Hildegard von Bingen, right? Why not? The Awen of the Druids, right? That spirit of inspiration, of wisdom, of knowledge. It doesn't have to be anything else, right? Or it can be. It's up to you. And this translation, by the way, is of course by Morgan Daimler, whose work I really respect. And my very limited understanding of Airmid and the mythology around her comes from the Irish pagan school, Laura O'Brien. When it comes to paganisms of a particular place, especially the Irish and Welsh and Scottish, for lots of reasons, whenever you can learn from native teachers, awesome. So Airmid leads us into air, right? Is there a linguistic cognate between these goddesses? I don't know. I haven't been able to find anything. I'm not going to like say that that's what I think because the comments will get filled with linguist nerds and etymologists calling me out, but it's possible. It's fun to romanticize. Air means protection, help, and mercy, and she is of the Norse pantheon, right? The mighty Vikings. There is a lot of back and forth about whether Eir is actually a goddess, part of the Norse pantheon, or a Valkyrie, right? A power spirit aligned with that same mythology. I don't know enough about that tradition to have an opinion about it, but I think it's cool when people can't agree on these things. It shows how dynamic these more than human spirits can be. But Eir is physician par excellence. She is physician to humans, physicians to deities, physicians to other spirits. And there's very little about her, right? Very little written down, very little concrete information. Again, to the extent that people argue, was she even a goddess? Was she just a Valkyrie? But I think that's cool. But here's an example of syncretism and the reality of the deities that in modern Norse paganism, you will not find anyone practicing Asatru, Norse paganism, whatever, who's interested in healing, herbs, herbal medicine that doesn't know about her, right? That doesn't have a relationship with her. So, as much as she may not have held a big enough position, back then to be written down more or attested more. And maybe there's a reason for that. Some deities just defy being attested to. Now she speaks to people, and now people have relationships with her. And I know folks practicing Norse herbal medicine, herbal magic, who really feel like she is a very important teacher in their work. Let's do a little reading from the Poetic Edda, shall we? Svipdag spake, "Now answer me, Fiolsvith, the question I ask, for now the truth would I know. What maidens are they that at Nengloth's knees are sitting so gladly together?" And Fiolsvith spake, "Hlif is one named, Hliftrasa another, Thiothvara call they the third, Bjort and Blake, Blith and Frith, Eir and Arbota." Fiolsvith spake, "Soon aid they all who offers give on the holy altars high, and if dangers they see for the sons of men, then each day from ill do they guard." So here is just one of very few references to the name Eir, and we're assuming that it is the goddess Eir. And this is again why people are saying, was she a maiden to one of the gods? Was she a maiden to Nengloth? Was she a Valkyrie? We don't know. This story is a little confusing, but we know that very clearly the Poetic Edda says that anyone who makes offerings to them, if they're in danger, then each day they will be guarded from illness by Eir and these other maidens named, right? So how cool is that? I love to find these in the stories. So hail Eir. Now we're going to move over into the Anglo-Saxon deities. Because we have several more. This is a tradition I practice, so I have a lot more to say about this. And these are deities that I hope will be a new handshake for some of you, a new meetup, right? The ways of Wortcunning are rooted in England, right? Current day England, and really many parts of the British Isles too. When the Germanic pagans invaded the British Isles and came into England, they brought their gods and their herbal ways with them and then settled into the land and learned the plants of that land. And from that tradition, we get Wortcunning. Wortcunning is an Anglo-Saxon sacred term. Wort means any herb, root, or plant that we work with, and cunning means the hidden knowledge of. So Wortcunning means to be herbwise. So the ways of traditional Wortcunning are rooted in this land, this culture, and these deities, which is why I have a little bit more to say about them. The Anglo-Saxon deities are super cool. Most of them are cognate with Norse deities that you'll know, and some of the deities from the continent, and even some Vedic ones as well, right? Because they're all coming from the Proto-Indo-European people. There's a class on that on my YouTube if you want to learn more. They all have Indo-European connections. So if you meet a deity in this conversation and you're like, that deity is super cool, but I have no real connection to the Germanic pagans or the English paganism or the British Isles or Anglo-Saxons, cool. You can probably find how that same deity showed up for a different group of people within that large India to Ireland Indo-European group of people, Indo-Iranian to Ireland. So those connections are there in most cases. Sometimes groups, especially the Norse and to some degree the Anglo-Saxons, have deities that we don't see anywhere else, right? That they've kind of only revealed themselves to one particular group of people. But that's an exception, not a rule. Before we get into this, I want to make a brief declaration of inclusivity, and I will also try to put this down in the comments below. My ancestors, my Anglo-Saxon ancestors, were concerned with culture, not ethnicity. Everyone is welcome to worship these gods, to practice Wortcunning, to engage in Anglo-Saxon paganism, regardless of anything qualifying other than culture, right? Regardless of your ethnicity, your race, your gender, your sexual orientation, your ability, none of that qualifies or disqualifies you from fully participating in Wortcunning. The Indo-Europeans were an ethnically diverse group of people united by culture, right? Meaning they were united by the languages they spoke, the gods they worshipped, the rituals they did, the way they put their societies together, the way they did seasons, right? So they were ethnically diverse. They were an ethnic melting pot, which is exactly the world I want to live in. I like being around a bunch of different kinds of people. That's the world I want to live in. That's the dream I have for America, the country I live in, that we can all be diverse and united and overlapping in ways by culture, with deep respect, right? And kinship. Seems very simple to me, but people love to complicate. So let's talk about some cool Anglo-Saxon deities. We have to start, of course, with Woden. Woden is the Anglo-Saxon name for the Norse god Odin, right? Which a lot of you may be more familiar with. Here's a little god post, a little whale of Woden that I think is very cute. Woden is a great wisdom keeper, and in all of the stories around him, it really focuses on him gathering wisdom, sending his ravens out to collect information, hanging from the world tree to learn the runes. He's very invested in gathering wisdom and propagating it, making sure that it's protected and that it's then handed on. We see time and time and time again, both in the Norse and the Anglo-Saxon mysteries, that Woden is related to both runes and Wertas, the herbs, right? That he is very invested in the runic mysteries, which is what he's most famous for, but he's equally as invested in the herbs, the plant mysteries. And so I consider Woden to be one of the topmost Anglo-Saxon gods of the Eortha Witta, the herb wise. Very cool god, right? Let me read you this one verse from the Neon Eortha Galdr, the 9 herbs charm of the Laknunga. This is a 10th century manuscript written down in the 10th century based on ancient material. A snake came crawling, it bit a man. Then Woden took 9 glory twigs, smote the serpent so that it flew into 9 parts. There Apple brought this pass against poison that she nevermore would enter her house. So here we see Woden uh, taking 9 twigs, 9 medicinal herbs, throwing them at the snake to destroy it. And the snake then gets separated into 9 parts, and that becomes 9 core illnesses, 9 core diseases, to which each one of those herbs has an affinity. And we learn about those 9 herbs in the Neon Verte Galdr, the 9 herbs charm, right? And it is Woden who defines this. It is Woden who defines which herbs relate to which diseases, which could have something to do with body parts, body processes. This is something I think about all the time. So, Woden, we think about him as god of runes, but look, there's as much out there about the Huerta, the herbs. Here's another great story that I think about. This is, of course, a verse from the second Merseburg charm, worthy of meditation. Full and Woden were riding to the woods, and the foot of Balder's foal was sprained. So Sintgund, Sunna's sister, conjured it, and Freya, Vola's sister, conjured it, and Woden conjured it as well he could. Like bone sprain, so blood sprain, so joint sprain, bone to bone, joints to joints, blood to blood, so may they be glued. Here, several deities, including Sunna and Freya, are invoked. But it is made very clear that Woden conjured it. He's the one that wrapped it all up as well he could, right? He is the one who knows how to mend bone to bone, mend blood to blood, mend joints to joints so that they may be glued, to make the foal, the horse, whole again. So we don't have a shortage of charm, of story about Woden being connected to healing and the herbs in libcraft, medicine craft, leechcraft, and workscraft, right? So let us please free Woden from the rune box. Yes, he is the god of runes. He is the one who sacrificed himself on the world tree to himself in order to gain the wisdom of the runes, the subtle patterns of the universe that we now use for magic and charms and divination. But that's one thing among many, which is why Woden is so popular. We definitely think in the Anglo-Saxon world that Woden is the most popular god, but it's likely based on some emerging research that before Woden stepped in post-Christianity as the more and more like important god because it was easy to cognate him with Christ, that Ingui was the most important god, Freyr, Ingui Freyr. And in Norse, he is, of course, Freyr. We call him Ingui or Ingfreyr. And he is the god of the world, right? This is what one of his kennings is. And so Ingui is the god over frith, which is peace, kinship, right relationships, and ar, which is prosperity, specifically prosperity in relation to crops, right? Ar is like you had a good yield, you had a good, it's actually where our word year comes from. Year comes from our, you've had a good year, a good produce, a good harvest. And Ingfreyr, he's over this. Yeah. He's, by the way, one of my favorites. I try not to play favorites, but I love Ingui. He is also Lord of the Light Ulfa. As part of his childhood gifting, Woden put him in charge of the of Elfgard, of the world of the elf, right? And if you know anything about the Elfa, you know that they are spirits that are very invested in plants. In fact, the care, the life energy, the vital force that moves into the green realm actually gets managed by the Alpha. So, Ingui, as Lord of the Elfa, King of the Elves, he's King of Elfheim, literally, right? Which then moves him over into traditional witchcraft stuff, which is super interesting. As Lord of the Light Alpha, of King of Elfheim, he is directly in connection with the maintenance of plants, with the care of plants, with the protection of not only the physical nature of plants, but also their wisdom. I will occasionally approach Ingfreyr, as keeper of the green wisdom, right? He knows all of it. He is over fertility and prosperity of the land and of the plants. And he, of course, has a Futhorc rune, an English rune, shown here, Ing, named after him. So this is a very powerful symbol for Ingvi. Then we have Beowa. We don't know a lot about Beowa, other than that his name is cognate with our modern word barley, right? It's where we get barley. And in English folklore, we do believe that the folkloric person, John Barleycorn, with whom there is a really beautiful song, is actually Beowa. Is Beowa moved from the Anglo-Saxon pagan mindset into the English folkloric mindset. And so Beowa is a god of grains and ale, specifically the process whereby grains are killed, they are cut down and harvested, fermented into alcohol, which then gives us new life through inebriation, right? So he has a death to birth aspect, showing us what happens between the time that the plants are harvested and the time that they return, whether in ale or food or in their springtime reemergence. So Beowa is very much, one of those green gods, one of those gods of agriculture, gods of barley corn. And when we say barley corn, we really mean any grain foodstuffs. That word corn is kind of used as a broad spectrum placeholder. So Beowa, I am kind of just starting to flirt with him a little bit, make a little relation. I finally found some good information about him that gave me some confidence. Again, I have my own hoops that I consider someone has to jump through to be considered a deity. And we're just getting there for me with Beowa. Sunna. Sunna is, of course, goddess of the sun, keeper of the sun. This gets her in relationship to Eortha. It gets her into relationship to Hausos and Eostra, the dawn goddesses, and of course to the Ashwins, the Alcis, the horse twin gods, right? Those horse twins in many traditions are seen as pulling the chariot that Sunna rides across the day, right? As she carries the sun across the sky each day, it is the horse twins that are pulling that chariot after Yostra or Hausos opens the gates for them. So she is healing and life-giving as goddess of the sun. She sends vital force to the land. She inspires growth in the seasons. She helps us keep time and measure about when we should plant seeds, when we should harvest, when we should allow the land to rest. And as healer and life giver, she is very much connected with healing, right? So anyone doing any kind of healing, even if it's allopathic, you're a physician or a doctor, Sunna makes a lot of sense as a deity to have a relationship. But her nature as sun carrier gives her a closeness to herbs that I think is really empowering. And I think about Sunna and calendula, right, as a connection because calendula is a sun chaser. This is one of those mini plants that, as the sun moves across the daytime sky, as Sunna's cart is pulled across the sky, those plants move to keep their face always aimed at her in worship, right? So Sunna, goddess of the plants, of healing, of warmth, of moving, stagnation, of bringing light to dark places. The difference between death and life in many forms of herbal medicine is between coldness and warmth, right? So she symbolizes warmth, bringing light after the nighttime. We will end with Eortha, the goddess Earth, of course, whose name we share with the modern English Earth. She's known by other names, including Folda, Retta, Nerthus, maybe, Ercha. Hard to say, but Eortha is the one I feel the most confident about because it connects to the word earth, and I think she's an earth goddess. So from her physical form, all plants are given birth. She gives rise to all the plants. When we plant seeds, it is into her womb that we place those seeds in darkness so they can gestate and grow and burst forth in the spring when Sunna calls them forward as she rises. And Eortha continues to nourish those plants. And then we harvest those plants and we are then nourished directly from them, right? Or if you eat animals, the animals eat the plants and then you eat the animals. Either way, Eortha is our direct sustenance. And I tell people all the time, if you don't have a connection with the old gods, if you don't consider yourself an animist or a polytheist, the easiest two deities to work with are Eortha and Sunna. They are deities that you can physically see with your eyes, right? Many of them are that way. We have storms and thunder and the moon and all of that. But Earth and Sun literally keep you alive, right? You can literally every day trace your existence, your ability to exist to both of these places. Eortha is the mother. We all emerge from her. Even in your own mother's womb, it is through all of the things that she received from the earth that allowed her body to grow your body. So the goddess Earth, Eortha, in whatever form, again, she's an Indo-European goddess going all the way back to Demeter, the earth goddess, the wide and flat goddess. Every tradition has her in one way or another. She's a very easy one to connect to because you can, with the most skeptical mind, you can say, yes, the earth sustains me, right? And so she is worthy of my veneration. So we end with Eortha, one of my favorite goddesses. And interestingly, one of the least anthropomorphized pagan goddesses, and also one of the hardest ones to really pin down because she's so magnanimous, but one of the ones that is often the goddess that calls people in. Um, if you are interested in some of my references for all of the previous slides, go ahead and grab a screen capture now. So, working with deities of Wortcunning. First, we need to see them as keepers of green wisdom. Again, we already talked about this a little bit, right? That they can teach you more about plants, right? Part of connecting with them is connecting with them as teachers, right? That they will connect us to the plants that we can work with. They will connect us to wisdom or people or teachers or ancestors or dreams, because they perceive the depths of green wisdom in a different way than we do, right? It's very cool. They are also protectors of the green realm in as much as they are protectors of the cosmos, right? We started our conversation with this idea that the gods protect order. They protect harmony and beauty. So they are protecting the plants. You will hear me say in many classes and many rituals and charms that I do that we give our honor to the plants and their guardians, right? And when I say that, personally, I mean the Ulfa and the deities that we just talked about, all the deities of all the traditions, the ones I know and the ones I don't know, who protect the plants. They have a vested interest in plants. They're nerdy about plants like we're nerdy about plants, right? We can work with these deities to bless our medicine, to bring a depth of spirit and mindfulness and heart to our medicine that might not be there if we just follow a recipe, right? We can craft a tea or an incense or a tincture or make an herbal bath, and we can connect with one of these deities that we're close with, and ask them to layer on their blessings. And, when it comes to that, by the way, there's this wise thing that I didn't come up with, obviously, somebody smart, where the best deity to work with in any case, right, is always the one that you have the closest relationship to. So if you're super herby and you have a really deep relationship with a deity that's not super herby, that deity will still always be the best deity to go to for your super herby things. If they don't want to do that with you, if they don't want to play that with you, they will find a way to bring someone else into your hearth culture who will fit with you and fit with them, right? Who can share a way of wood, share an altar with them. This is the thing that happens, and plants do it too, by the way. As chargers of charms, we saw with the Nigan-Werta Galder, the 9 herbs charm, we saw in the second Merseburg charm, constantly invoking the names of gods to bless and charge the charm. So we have the plant materia there. We're calling out to the plants and we're layering on the blessings of the deities. We want more is more, right? And they are guardians and guides on the plant spirit path. People ask me about protection and about initiation and the mysteries. The plants will give that to you directly, and the deities of Wortcunning will also give that to you directly. And if you're doing something wonky, if you are doing something that is making it hard for them to do their job, which is preserve harmony to protect the plants, they will find ways to show you. It can be easy for people to work with plants in a really destructive, misaligned, capitalist way. And the plants will kind of just let you do that because that's their nature. But when you have some of these deities in your life, they will quickly adjust you. they will quickly call you to task and get you back on the path. And I like that. I like knowing that if I get cocky, if my perspective of things starts to get skewed, that one of the deities of my tradition will come in and be like, hey, shut it down, tighten it up, right? It's a good thing. When we think about cultivating our hearth practice, right, it really is just the combination of the plants that you work with the most, your plant spirit allies, and the deities of your ways. And they can come together in an infinite number of combinations. And we could, of course, add to this conversation nature spirits, the dwers, the Ilfa, spirits of place, and the ancestors, of course. But the hearth practice is centered around the gods with whom you are in reciprocal kinship and that bless you, right? Again, we don't work with deities who don't care about us or that don't do anything for us. That's pointless. Um, Even though it seems like, oh, this God never responds to me and I never feel a connection, but I'm going to keep making offerings and praying to them because I'm selfless. Actually, that way of thinking is closer to transactional relationship than you think, right? Because then you're thinking, well, I'm going to keep giving even though the relationship is unrequited, right? It's unresponsive. So work with the deities who call you, who feel warm to you, who respond to you, right? Those are your deities, and they change over time sometimes, but ultimately, our core hearth culture might be one, might be three, 5, 10, 12. Like it is what it is. But in my work of Wortcunning, right, the plants also play a role. That for every deity that has a spot on my altar, I also have plant spirits that I'm very close with, that maybe they have a connection with one of those deities and maybe they don't. Here on the image is juniper. This is Juniperus osteosperma, the juniper that grows where I live, and a little whale, a little icon of the juniper spirit, and a sachet, and all these things. I work with juniper as a teacher, a guardian, an initiator. I say a charm with juniper every single morning before I leave the house. And so this plant is as much of my hearth practice as any deity is. And sometimes, because of the work I do, uh, I spend more time and energy interacting with plant spirits in an average day than I do the gods. Maybe it's a 10-minute offering and prayer for the deities that day, but I spend 8 hours at work seeing clients, making herbal medicine, doing these classes, right? So for me, sometimes it is this order: the plants of your ways, and then the deities of your ways, but they should be mutually beneficial. A big thing for me is you should not feel like you have to hold them in two different hands. If you feel like your plant spirit work has to go on a different altar than your deity work, in my opinion, and in my personal practice, that would be very challenging for me. If I couldn't make it work, if it felt disaligned, if for some reason the gods that I worked with thought my work with herbs was not beautiful or harmonious. I'm a vocational wort cunner, right? So um, if they're not blessing the work I do, are they blessing me, right? So I think about that. So with that, thank you so very much. Here on this channel, I put a class up every single Friday. So if you haven't subscribed, please do that. Leave a comment below. Let me know what you thought. If you have herb nerdy friends, please take a moment to send them one of my classes. It really goes a long way, and I love meeting new people. So share this with somebody today. We have our Patreon community where you get access to all of my content. If you think this class was good, this is a free class. You should see what we're doing over on Patreon. Courses, advanced classes, our monthly community plant spirit sits are where it's at. That's the magic. And chats and community, lots of incredible people to learn from. I learn stuff from people over there every single day. And I've also written 2 books, Spiritual Herbalism and The Green Art. I suggest reading them in that order. They were published by Aeon Publishing in London, and you can find them wherever you buy books. Thanks, guys, so much. This was a long one. Thanks for sticking with me. Peace and blessings. See you next time.